I have now had a full week with the Xbox One X, playing games, running tests, and now I feel confident in bringing you guys my full review. So let's break down my thoughts on the Xbox One X. Let's take a look at the technical specifications of the Xbox One X compared to the more standard version, the One S, and how much of an upgrade it actually is power-wise. First off, the CPU. Now, both of them make use of 8-core processors, but the One S is clocked at 1.75 GHz, whereas the One X is at 2.3 GHz.
0.21 gigawatts.
The important takeaway here, the One X is 30% faster. Now, things get a bit more interesting with the GPU. The really kind of popular way people are measuring this right now are how many teraflops each one is capable of. If you don't know what that is,
What the hell is a gigawatt?
the basic idea is a teraflop is how many different floating point calculations these systems are capable of. So in the One S's case, it's 1.4 teraflops, whereas the Xbox One X is at a whopping 6 teraflops. So just over 4 times the power of the One S. And lastly, as far as performance goes, there's how much RAM each system has. The Xbox One S has 8 GB, whereas the One X has 12. An important thing to note here, though, is that when it comes to the Xbox, 3 GB of RAM are always dedicated to the system itself and not actually running games. So when we're talking about the amount of RAM available for gaming, it's actually not an increase from 8 to 12, it's an increase from 5 to 9, almost twice as much. And then last but not least, let's take a look at the hard drive sizes. Whereas the Xbox One S originally launched at 500 GB, most ones you grab today though are a terabyte, and occasionally there have been limited runs of 2 terabyte systems. The Xbox One X, on the other hand, currently is only planned for a 1 terabyte hard drive, but it is very important to note that it is not the same style of hard drive. It is actually a faster one to ensure that 4K loading times are not going to be horrifically long. And in fact, a side benefit of this is that if you're still playing games in 1080p, you're going to see faster load times compared to the One S. It's also worth noting that as far as ports go, the One X is exactly the same as the One S. They have the same power port, they both have an HDMI in and HDMI out, 2 USB ports on the back, 1 USB port in the front, IR out, optical out, and an Ethernet port. Now, what all this power means for the Xbox One X are 2 things. 4K gaming, and what's called Xbox One enhanced games. Otherwise, pretty much everything between the One X and the One S is the same. They both do 4K video playback, they both do HDR in both video and games, and they have the same multimedia services. The important thing is how it impacts the visuals of your gameplay experience. Now, the 4K aspect is a pretty obvious upgrade for those of you that own 4K TVs. You're getting a higher resolution, and therefore a much more higher quality image. Obviously, not every game offers true native 4K. It's something that's based on a game-by-game basis. But even if you're playing a game that isn't patched specifically for 4K resolutions, you're still going to see it upscaled to have a slightly better image. Now, some other titles aren't going to have native 4K either, but instead just have better variations. For instance, Quantum Break makes use of more advanced upscaling techniques, so while it is rendering out at 1440, you're going to get a better image than normal. Otherwise, there are other games that are just going to get full-blown native 4K, which looks fantastic, like Forza 7, Gears of War 4, a lot of big first-party titles from Microsoft. Now, a consequence of this is that the games are getting much larger. And a really cool thing that Microsoft has done is that games are going to have variable download sizes based on which system you own. So for instance, if you're still playing on an Xbox One S, you obviously don't need 4K textures for Forza, so the game's only going to be 67 gigs. But if you get it on the One X, it's going to weigh in at 95. So as a result, you're going to fill up the 1 terabyte hard drive of the Xbox One X very, very quickly, especially if you're playing a lot of big-name AAA stuff. So as a result, getting an external hard drive on a system like this is much more of a necessity. Now, for those of you that don't own 4K TVs, you might be wondering, well, is there any reason for me to consider getting a One X in the first place? And the answer I've come to is, well, actually yes, for 3 different reasons. First off, super sampling. Now, if a game supports 4K resolution, even if your TV doesn't actually do that, the Xbox One X will do what's called super sampling, where it'll render out the 4K image and then downscale it to your 1080p resolution. This results in a crisper, cleaner, and better image than something that's rendered out in 1080p in the first place. Is it as good as native 4K? No, but it is better. Reason number 2. Like I said earlier, thanks to the faster hard drive, you will experience faster boot and load times for all of your games. For instance, in Gears of War 4, when we're loading up a specific level in the Xbox One S, it takes 44 seconds, whereas loading up that same level on the One X only took 38. And lastly, and by far the biggest reason why, is Xbox One Enhanced. Now, if you ever look at game cases for Xbox One games, you might start to see these new tags showing up. 4K, which means it supports 4K gaming, HDR, supports HDR, and then Xbox One Enhanced, which is a bit of a more miscellaneous mixed term. This means that the game offers some kind of improvements and enhancements on the Xbox One X that can't just simply be categorized as being 4K or HDR. For instance, on Gears of War 4, if you're playing the game on a 1080p screen, you have the option to play with better visuals or better performance. With better visuals, while you're still getting a 1080p resolution, it's going to be using that super sampling I mentioned earlier, and going to have enhanced graphical effects on top of that, while keeping the 30 frames per second that you normally see in the campaign and horde modes. On the other hand, if you do performance mode, you're going to see slight visual upgrades, but it's still going to be 1080p, but most importantly, it'll actually be playing at a full 60 frames per second, which in my opinion is a much better choice. Now, we do our videos in 24 frames, so obviously you can't really see that right now, so we're going to link to another video that's unlisted so you can check that out and see the difference between 4K 30 and 1080p 60 frames. Now, an important thing to note is that just like with 4K support, not all games are going to have some kind of Xbox One Enhanced mode. It's up to developers on a game-by-game basis. So not every single game is going to get frame rate increases. Not every single game is going to make use of super sampling or enhanced visual effects. So if you don't own a 4K TV and you want to make use of Xbox One X enhancements, you got to make sure to pay attention to what games you care about and whether or not they're going to see any kind of upgrades. Thankfully, Xbox is pushing really hard to make sure that a lot of their first-party titles get some kind of enhancement, unless it's really unnecessary for a game like, say, Cuphead. And it looks like that a lot of big-name AAA games are also getting support as well. For instance, Middle-earth: Shadow of War and Rise of the Tomb Raider also support increased frame rates like Gears of War 4. Even more surprisingly is the fact that not only are Xbox One games getting these enhancements, but also some 360 titles as well. We're seeing some of the backwards compatible stuff get improvements to where we're getting greater color depth and actual upscaled 4K resolution, so you can play Halo 3 or Fallout 3 or even the original Assassin's Creed with better visuals than ever. What's even more impressive about all this is that you're not only getting this increased performance, but the system is still running just as quiet as past systems. It is maybe slightly louder than the One S, but you're really only going to notice this if you're in a perfectly quiet room. Otherwise, you're never really going to notice the sound the system makes. Now, if all this is sounding good to you guys so far, I have some good news for you. I'm actually giving away a Project Scorpio Edition Xbox One X that I'm doing alongside with John from TLD Today, so if you want details on how to enter that giveaway, check out the link down below in the description. Now, there is one other thing I want to talk about with this system though, and that's how it looks compared to the One S, because I gotta be honest with you guys, I kinda like the look of the One S better. Now, to be honest, part of this comes from just the fact that I don't like the look of an all-black system. I know a lot of people have been clamoring they want a black Xbox that isn't just the original one, but I honestly think it's a downgrade. And it's not that I think white just looks better, I just like the two-tone approach. I like the contrast, which this doesn't give you at all. One thing I do like about the One X though, is that I really like how they've moved the disk drive to being this kind of hidden space between the main body and the base. I think that looks really good. It gives this kind of just nice, solid, monolithic look to it, which I do think is an upgrade. So I'm really excited to see if any more colors for this are gonna come out in the future, but as for right now, definitely like the look of the One S more. So the ultimate question is this: should you buy an Xbox One X? Maybe. Look, if you own a 4K TV, the benefits are obvious. And even if you don't, like I said, there's a lot of games that do benefit from the increased power. It's just whether or not the game's getting those upgrades for you is worth spending an extra $200 to $250. If you already own an Xbox One S, spending $500 all over again to get a new system is a bit of a harder sell. But if you don't have an Xbox One yet, I honestly do think it's worth saving up to get this system, especially as more and more games adopt upgrades like 60 frames. Because every game that gets the 60 frame patch makes the system all the more worth it, in my opinion.